Hi everyone, this is JJ with Desert Whimsy, and today we're going to learn a basic chain stitch and single crochet. In front of me here I have my hook, my practice yarn, and I've put it in this yarn bowl because it's kind of unraveling and I'm chasing it all over the desk, so we'll do it that way. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a slip knot in order to have a loop to start my project with. So I'm going to take my yarn in my right and left hand. My left hand's just going to kind of hold on to it here for a minute. I'm going to throw the tail over the front, and I'm going to make sure this is long enough that I have some left over when I'm done with my tie. I'm going to flip that tail up in the back. You see I've created kind of this little triangle here. I'm now going to loop that over here and pull it through that loop. So basically I've tied a half hitch around this bottom post. When I pull that tight, my loop will slide. Pretty cool, huh? All right. My husband said he spent all of Boy Scouts learning how not to do that, but here we go. So now you're going to tighten that up around your hook. You want it loose enough that you can move your hook fairly easily. If you have it too tight, you'll just make your life difficult. Now I use my left hand for tension. My right hand holds the hook. When I use this hand for tension, I kind of wrap the yarn around my pinky and then up through over my index finger. However you wrap the yarn, it really doesn't matter. You just find kind of the easiest way for you to do it. Now here, I'm gonna start my chain stitch. Now a chain is literally, I'm just gonna catch my yarn and pull it through the loop on my hook over and over and over again. So I like to wrap my yarn back to front. If you do it the other way, it's harder to pull through this loop and you end up dropping it a lot and it becomes pretty frustrating. So I go up and over the top of the hook like that. And then I just pull it through. Now you want your chain stitches to be loose. You don't want them to be super tight because as you work your project, you're gonna end up hating yourself because it's hard. You're gonna end up having to put your hook back through these loops. And if you make them too tight, it's really difficult to work with. So I'm just catching my yarn and wrapping it around my hook and pulling it through the loop. Now I'm just gonna make a chain here that's about, I don't know, 6 inches long or something so that we have something to work with when we do our single crochets back into the chain. Almost every project will start with some kind of a chain stitch. So it's a good skill to have, especially if you can make your chain easy to work with and loose enough that you can get your hook through. I remember when I learned to crochet way back in the day, I just did chains over and over and over again, and I would turn them into bracelets and make little rugs out of them for my Barbies and things. But so now we have our basic chain here. All right, now each one of these little braids counts as one. So I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I have 21. All right, now when I turn my project, usually you turn it and you work then in the ugly side of the chain. Some of them might tell you to leave it on this side and just work back across it, but I usually turn it and work on this ugly side. Now you'll notice there's there are 3 parts of this chain. There's a top loop. They call this little bump here the third loop, and then if you flip it over to the pretty side, this is the back loop. So when you go to work back across this chain, it's most common you're going to work in this top loop. But some projects might tell you to work in the third loop, because if you do, then you end up with that pretty braid on the bottom. Or you might even be told to work in the back loop. So just kind of pay attention to what your project says, and that's the loop you're going to go into. So I'm going to go in this top loop first. Now I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to put it in that loop. I'm going to grab my yarn, pull it through. I'm going to wrap it and pull it through 2, and we've just completed our first single crochet. All right, now I'm going to zoom in here so you can see that a little closer. All right, so I'm going to stab it through my loop. I'm going to grab the yarn, pull it through, then I'm going to wrap it and pull it through 2. Now you'll notice my hands kind of move all over the place, and I'm trying to keep a hold of this project so it doesn't move out of the way and keep my tension on my yarn and manipulate my hook around. So you end up kind of passing the project back and forth between your different hands. as well as making sure that your tension is consistent. And that's just something you kind of learn over time, is keeping that consistent tension. It keeps your project more even and it makes it look more consistent throughout. And it also makes your next row easier if all your stitches are pretty much the same tension. All right, so I'm gonna stab it through the hole here. I'm gonna grab the yarn on the other side, pull it through, wrap it, pull it through two. All right, so let me do that a couple more times. I'm going to stab it through the hole, grab it, pull it through, wrap it, pull it through two. Now I'm going to do this all the way to the other side so I can show you how to turn. Now sometimes you will have trouble getting through that top loop just because of the chain and the way the yarn lays and things, but don't worry about it. The first two rows in a project are the hardest. After that, everything gets easier. I actually started my class out with 2 rows of this type of swatch done so that people could start and build some confidence before I made them do the hard stuff. So again, I'm going to stab it through the hole, grab my yarn, pull it through, wrap it, and pull it through two. Now, as I'm working, you'll notice my tail on my project kind of starts to curl a little bit. That's normal. Don't panic. That's what it's supposed to be doing. As soon as we do our second row, it'll flatten out because we'll go back the other direction. Crochet has a little bit of a handwriting slant to it. So you'll notice when you go one direction, it slants towards the left. When you go the other direction, it's going to slant towards the right. Now I hold my hook usually just above or on this little dent in the hook. There are different types of crochet hooks that don't necessarily have that dent, but usually the ones you have when you're beginning all have that dent. And it's kind of just a good place to rest your thumb when you're starting. If you start too far down the hook, if you're way down here when you're using the hook, it's really hard to get it through that hole and you end up being super frustrated. It's kind of like learning to write. You always write, you choke up on the pencil at the beginning, right? Okay, and then this one here, when I get to the end, this is my last stitch, is that guy right there. So I don't try and go in that part of my knot. I will just go into this guy. Now with anything, you want to get to the end and count your stitches and make sure you've maintained the same stitches you started with. Remember I think we had 20 when we started. When you go back and count them, again, you count these braids. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Perfect. Now I'm going to chain to turn. So I've gotten to the end. I've got my first row done. Now I'm going to chain to turn. So I'm going to, again, just wrap the yarn around my hook and pull it through the loop. And then I'm going to turn my project. I'm always going to crochet right to left, opposite of how we read. Okay, now when you turn, this chain does not count as a stitch. So I'm going to go in top of my first single crochet here. So I'm going to go through that front loop. I'm going to wrap the yarn, pull it through, wrap it, and pull it through two. All right, and I'm going to do that again all the way across, and then I'll use that same method to chain and turn. Now once I get a few stitches done here, I'm going to flip this around and show you what it looks like. Now because we're going in one loop of our top braid here, when we flip it around, we have this nice little rope pattern that shows up, and that will stay throughout the project, this little rope pattern here. That'll stay throughout our project, and you'll end up seeing a raised line on this side alternating, then this side, then this side, then this side. And it kind of gives it a cool texture as you're going. All right, well, if you have any questions, please feel free to catch me on my website, desertwhimsy.com, or message me on Facebook. And I hope to see you again soon. But that is a basic chain and single crochet.